Why buy? Why buy? At the end of the day, a lot of people do say, why do you buy and why don't you rent? Obviously, there's the whole asset, status, that kind of stuff. But really, why do you want to buy? And what does it take to buy something? I mean, for me, I didn't think a lot about it. I just jumped in because I just kept on thinking, well, I didn't want to rent because that's paying someone else's mortgage. I wanted to buy myself. But it does take confidence. And over the years, I've kind of realized how it is difficult to take the plunge. But I'd be interested to know, and I'd love for you guys to put in the comments whether you've bought, whether you haven't bought, and why, what is going on, what is your thought process? I mean, why did you buy in the first place? Why have you not bought your property? Now, I've spoken to a lot of people, and the reason why they have not bought yet, and it comes down to, yes, it comes down to deposit, yes, it comes down to affordability, but those things you can actually work on. What you have to make a decision is whether you think it's worth it or you think you're worth it. There's a couple of things to take into consideration. It is, I had this discussion with someone and they were saying how much of a big responsibility is by having a mortgage, by owning your own property. That is your own property, bricks and mortar. But to me, I just find that exciting, actually owning something, right? But to other people, that's just like a lot of commitment, more than they were planning on taking on. So, I mean, is that you? Is it the commitment element that is holding you back? Is it the fact of the responsibility of, you get a mortgage out, it's you're responsible for paying that mortgage every single month. And if you miss a payment, worst case scenario, it will go into arrears, i.e. late payments. And then once it gets to a certain point, the bank will sell it in order to pay back the debt that you owe. Because at the end of the day, a mortgage is the biggest debt that you'll ever commit to. So some people just say, do you know what? It's too much responsibility. It's too much for me to even get my head round the idea of buying it. Some other people have said to me, it's a cultural thing, or it's where you're from. So there are certain places in the world that you would not even think of buying ever. Everybody rents, it's just the way it is. And then there's, maybe it's a generational thing that, a few years ago, we won't say how long, my age, it was seen to, actually, no, I was the first of my peers to buy. So maybe 10 years after I bought my first place, it was more sort of mid to late 20s who were buying. When I was buying, it was more sort of early 30s, and I think it's gone back to sort of early 30s. But I would be really interested to know what your thoughts are, why you think buying is a good idea, why you think buying isn't a good idea. I'd love to have a conversation about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I can list reasons. So as I said, the idea, I remember when I bought my first property and just walking around and saying, wow, I own this, and a lot of people said to me, oh, you'll never be able to afford your own place. And I did it. So it was a case of doing something that people didn't think I could achieve. Maybe that's the main reason I did it. The other thing was freedom. I mean, at the end of the day, you have your own place, you have your own space. It is, a lot of people now are still living with their parents, and they're living with their parents to a much later age. But is it a female thing? Is it a male thing? I know my brother was more than happy to live at home, when with me, I wanted the independence. So yeah, it depends really, doesn't it, on what you feel comfortable doing. Do guys prefer to live at home for longer with their parents? When I say at home, do girls want to leave a little bit earlier? That's what I've seen with my personal experience and the amount of people that approach me as first time buyers. Some of them are, the majority. If normally, and I'd love to know in the chat your thoughts on this, but what I've seen is girls tend to want to move out sooner. If a guy wants to move out, it's a couple. You know, I've got one exception to the rule, and I'll probably put a comment in this, that actually wanted to buy first. But everybody else I've seen, it's normally the girl that does it, or the girl and a guy, so when they're a couple that do it. So I'd love to get your opinions on what you think. Is it a guy thing? Is it a girl thing? Is it a status thing? What do you think makes people want to buy a property? And then, as I said, what would make you never, ever... I mean, I've had a conversation with a guy and he never intends to own anywhere. He doesn't like the idea of being pinned down. He finds it too much of a commitment. So do you feel that way about it? I mean, is bricks and mortar just too much of a commitment? What are your thoughts? So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, just to get your opinion and to understand what your feelings were about it. And it would be really, really useful and interesting to know what your thoughts are. Does the idea of owning a property terrify the living daylights out of you, or do you think of it as the most exciting thing that you could ever think of? So I'd love for you to put in the chat what your thoughts are. And as I always say, if you'd like to subscribe, and we'll go from there. Take care. Good evening.